The obsidian walls of the High Synod of Zalthar drank the light, swallowing the bioluminescent glow of the hanging moss gardens that draped from the ceiling like the tattered banners of forgotten wars, creating an atmosphere of suffocating antiquity, where silence was not merely an absence of sound, but a physical weight pressing against the chitinous plates of the assembled counselors. It was a silence born of a dread so profound it had transcended panic and settled into a cold, brittle paralysis, the kind that grips a civilization when it realizes that the mathematics of survival no longer sum in its favor. High Counselor Vrax adjusted his ceremonial robes, the irid silk rustling with a sound like dry leaves skittering over a tomb, and looked down from the raised dais into the holographic pit, where the galaxy burned in miniature, a swirling drain of red icons consuming the calm blue of the Dominion's borders. He could smell the fear in the chamber, a sharp, acrid pheromone that the ventilation scrubbers, ancient and overworked, could no longer filter out, and he knew that the beings seated in the tiered shadows around him, representatives of 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 years of continuous history, were waiting for him to speak words that would turn back the tide, words that did not exist in any language known to the sentient cosmos. The enemy, a scouring locust tide known only as the Kyrax, had breached the Antares line, shattering the crystalline dreadnoughts of the Ilari Protectorate as if they were spun glass, and now the route to the core systems lay open, undefended, and terrifyingly short. "The projections are immutable," Admiral Kael'thas said, his voice a grinding rasp that vibrated through the floor plates, his 4 ocular sensors fixed unblinking on the red stain spreading across the hologram. "We have run the simulations through the logic engines until the cooling cores fused. We have consulted the ancestral algorithms. We have prayed to the silent voids. The result is a statistical singularity. The Kyrax fleets do not tire. They do not negotiate. They consume biomass and convert it into more ships. Our fleets are art. Theirs are cancer. Art cannot stop cancer. We require a sacrifice, a fire break." Vrax felt the eyes of the Synod bore into him, 1,000 distinct biological and cybernetic gazes demanding salvation. He tapped a claw against the armrest of his command throne, a rhythmic ticking that echoed in the vast chamber. "A fire break implies something to be burned," Vrax said, his voice smooth, cultivated, hiding the tremor of his inner spiracles. "We have no uninhabited systems left in that sector. To create a buffer zone substantial enough to slow the Kyrax until the core fleets can remobilize would require the abandonment of a sentient protectorate. You are suggesting we condemn a member species to extinction to buy ourselves a rotation of time." "Not a member species," Kael'thas corrected, and the hologram zoomed in, the light turning the Admiral's gray carapace a violent crimson. "A client species, the Terrans." A ripple of murmurs moved through the chamber, a sound like the tide washing over gravel. The Terrans, the humans, the newest, crudest addition to the Dominion's periphery. Vrax looked at the display, staring at the isolated cluster of systems the humans called home. They were a peculiar, ugly species, bipedal, soft-skinned, lacking natural armor or psychic resonance, obsessed with combustion and kinetic force, building ships that looked like flying bricks of raw metal rather than the elegant, energy-sculpted spires of the Dominion. They had been admitted only as a curiosity, a labor force, a species that showed potential for heavy industry but lacked the refinement, the spiritual depth, and the technological elegance to ever sit on the High Synod. They were loud, they were chaotic, and they were tragically, pitifully under-equipped for the horrors of a galactic war. "The Terrans," Vrax mused, feeling a pang of what might have been guilt if he were not a politician responsible for the survival of trillions. "They have been industrious. They supplied the raw ore for the rebuilding of the 7th moon. They have never missed a tribute payment." "They are mud-dwellers," Counselor Nemen of the Psionic Circle hissed, the air shimmering around his floating containment pod. "Their minds are a cacophony of static. They have no song. They have no grace. They possess barely 300 warp-capable vessels, and those rely on crude fusion reactions that pollute the subspace manifolds. If we withdraw our perimeter fleets from their sector, the Kyrax will descend upon them. The humans will fight. They are stubborn, primitively territorial creatures, and their destruction will occupy the Kyrax for perhaps 3 standard weeks. In that time, we can fortify the inner sanctum. It is the only logic that preserves the archives." The cruelty of the calculus was absolute, yet in the cold light of the war room, it felt unavoidable. The Dominion valued aesthetics, high philosophy, and the preservation of the higher forms of life. Humans, with their short lifespans and blocky architecture, were viewed as biological dust, useful for a moment, then swept away by the cosmic wind. They were underestimated not out of malice, but out of a supreme, blinding arrogance that equated technological beauty with power. The Synod believed that a ship must be beautiful to be strong, that a weapon must hum with harmonic resonance to be effective. The humans built silent, ugly things, therefore the humans were weak. "Summon their representative," Vrax commanded, the decision tasting like ash in his mouth. "We will not tell them they are a sacrifice. We will tell them they are being entrusted with the defense of the rear guard. Let them die with the illusion of purpose. It is the only mercy we can offer." The heavy doors of the chamber, carved from the bone of a leviathan that had died before the first star ignited, groaned open, and the silence in the room shifted, changing from the heaviness of dread to the sharpness of scrutiny. The human walked in. He was unaccompanied. He wore no armor, no ceremonial robes of office, no psionic dampeners. He was dressed in a suit of dark, woven fabric, cut with sharp lines that accentuated the fragility of his frame. He carried a simple briefcase in one hand and walked with a gait that was neither submissive nor aggressive, but disturbingly steady. This was Ambassador Elias Thorne, the voice of the Terran Coalition. He looked small in the vastness of the alien hall, a speck of organic matter amidst the soaring architecture of a billion-year-old empire. Thorne stopped at the center of the dais, looking up at the tiered seats of the masters of the galaxy. He did not bow. He simply nodded, a curt, efficient gesture. "High Counselor," Thorne said, his voice unamplified yet carrying clearly through the acoustic perfection of the chamber. "The Coalition received your urgent summons. Our fleets are holding position at the edge of the Helios shock. We await your instructions." Vrax leaned forward, his compound eyes studying the human. There was no fear in the primate's face, which was confusing. Surely the humans knew the Kyrax were coming. Surely their primitive radar had detected the wall of death approaching their borders. Or perhaps they were simply too stupid to understand the scale of the annihilation facing them. "Ambassador Thorne," Vrax began, pitching his voice to resonate with the authority of the ancients. "The war goes poorly. The enemy is vast. The Dominion has decided to consolidate its forces to protect the core archives, the repository of all galactic history. To do this, we must withdraw the Ilari picket fleets from your sector." Silence stretched. Vrax expected panic. He expected begging. He expected the human to fall to his knees and plead for the protection of the elder races. Instead, Thorne merely blinked. He set his briefcase down on the obsidian floor with a soft click. "You are pulling the shields," Thorne stated. It wasn't a question. It was a verification of data. "You are leaving the Sol sector and the 3 colony systems adjacent to it, open to the Kyrax vanguard. It is a strategic necessity," Admiral Kelthas rumbled, defensive anger coloring his tone. "Your species has the honor of holding the line. We calculate your resistance will delay them. Your sacrifice will be recorded in the Hall of Martyrs. It is a glorious end for a young race." Thorne looked at the Admiral, then back to Vrax. A strange expression crossed his face, not anger, not terror. It looked almost like pity. "You underestimate the Kyrax," Thorne said softly. "You believe they are mindless consumers. They are not. They are testing you, and now you are failing the test." "Do not presume to lecture us on the nature of the enemy, human," Nemen shrieked psychically, a spike of mental pain lancing through the room. "We have fought wars since your ancestors were banging rocks together. We are giving you a directive. Die well, that is your function." Thorne sighed. It was a long, weary exhalation. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, antiquated device, a pocket watch. He clicked it open, checked the dial, and closed it. "We anticipated this," he said. "The Coalition Senate ran the behavioral models on the Dominion 3 years ago. The probability of you abandoning us when the attrition rate exceeded 40% was calculated at 98.7%. We prepared accordingly." Vrax felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "Prepared? With what? Your kinetic slugs? Your fission bombs? You are children playing with matches in a forest fire." "We are not children," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its diplomatic veneer and revealing a core of cold, hard iron. "And we do not play. You look at our ships and you see ugliness. You see lack of grace. You judge technologue. Why by how it bends light, how it sings? You forgot that the universe is not built on song. It is built on physics. It is built on the violent interaction of matter and energy. You spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of the energy shield. We spent 200 years perfecting the art of ignoring it." "What are you babbling about?" Vrax demanded, standing up. "The Kyrax fleet will enter your system in less than 1 standard hour. You should be evacuating, not posturing." "They are already there," Thorne said. The room erupted in confusion. Kelthas slammed his claws onto his console. "Impossible. The long-range sensors show nothing. The Kyrax are still in warp." "Your sensors," Thorne said, tapping the side of his head, "are designed to detect subspace ripples and refined energy signatures. They are designed to see civilized technology. They are blind to the dark, blind to the quiet." Display the Sol sector, Vrax screamed at the control pit. The hologram shifted. The blue of the Dominion vanished, replaced by the black void of the human home territories. At first, there was nothing. The stars shone with cold indifference. Then the sensors updated. The Kyrax were there. A swarm of organic leviathans, millions of them, a cloud of biological horror that blotted out the stars. They were exiting warp, their maw cannons charging, ready to strip the atmosphere from Earth and its colonies. The sheer scale of the invasion force was enough to stop the hearts of the Synod. This was not a vanguard. This was the main host. The Dominion had miscalculated. The Kyrax hadn't just breached the line, they had bypassed it entirely to strike at the soft underbelly. "They are lost," Nemen whispered. "The humans are dead." "Watch," Thorn said. On the holographic display, the Kyrax fleet surged forward, a tidal wave of flesh and bone and plasma. They approached the human defensive line, a paltry collection of blocky space stations and bulky, ungraceful cruisers. The Dominion counselors flinched, waiting for the slaughter. They waited for the human ships to be vaporized by the elegant, terrifying biological beams of the enemy. But the human ships did not fire. Instead, the space between the human fleet and the Kyrax swarm simply distorted. It was not a shield. It was not a weapon in any sense the Dominion understood. It was as if the fabric of reality itself had been seized by a giant, invisible hand and twisted. The light from the distant stars bent into sickening spirals. The gravity sensors in the Synod chamber spiked so hard they shattered the glass of the displays. "What is that?" Kael'thas gasped. "Gravimetric shear, that is impossible on that scale. It would require a singularity." "We call it the anvil," Thorn said calmly. In the hologram, the Kyrax fleet hit the distortion. They did not explode, they crumpled. The lead leviathans, creatures the size of cities, were suddenly subjected to tidal forces equivalent to the event horizon of a black hole. Their biological armor, capable of withstanding antimatter bombardments, was compressed instantly into density resembling neutron star matter. The rear of the ships continued moving forward while the front stopped, telescoping the massive organisms into themselves. There was no sound in space, but the visual violence was so absolute it felt deafening. The Kyrax swarm, millions of ships strong, slammed into a wall of manipulated gravity. They were flattened, crushed, smear across the vacuum like bugs on a windshield. Then the human ships fired. They did not fire lasers. They did not fire plasma. They fired physical projectiles. But these were not the crude bullets the Dominion mocked. These were tungsten rods accelerated to 0.99 light speed by railguns spanning the length of entire colony ships. Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest son of a bitch in space, and the humans had turned his laws into a religion. The projectiles impacted the compressed, confused mass of the Kyrax fleet. The kinetic energy transfer was catastrophic. It wasn't just an explosion, it was a localized apocalypse. The impact sites flared with the brightness of new stars. The burning fleets of the Title were not human, they were the shattered remnants of the Kyrax, igniting in the fusion fire of pure kinetic obliteration. "By the ancestors," Vrax whispered, collapsing back into his throne. "They aren't fighting, they are erasing." "We do not fight for glory," Thorn said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence of the Synod. "We do not fight for art. We are a logical species, High Counselor. We saw a problem. We engineered a solution. You spent millennia trying to outdance the Kyrax. We decided to simply remove the floor they were dancing on." The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 12 minutes. The Kyrax Armada, the terror of the galaxy, the scourge that had broken the Ilari and terrified the Synod, was reduced to a cloud of expanding superheated gas and debris. The human ships had not moved, they had simply held the door, and the door was made of death. Thorn picked up his briefcase. "The Kyrax Vanguard is neutralized. However, our deep-range telemetry indicates a second wave approaching your core systems. They bypassed your beautiful shields because they operate on a frequency you consider inesthetic to monitor." He turned to leave, then paused. "We will deploy the Third Fleet to assist you, not because you deserve it, not because you asked, but because we are the humans. And when we see a fire, we put it out, even if the house belongs to a landlord who tried to evict us." The transition from the High Synod to the bridge of the human flagship, the Hephaestus Asterisk, was a shock to Vrax's senses. He had insisted on accompanying Thorn, a desperate diplomatic maneuver to understand the new power dynamic of the galaxy. Where the Synod was silent, dark, and organic, the Hephaestus was bright, loud, and aggressively industrial. The air smelled of ozone, coffee, and machine oil. Cables hung from the ceiling in chaotic bundles. The floor was metal grating that clanged underfoot. The crew was a kaleidoscope of activity, humans of all shapes and colors, shouting orders, typing furiously on tactile keyboards, running diagnostics. It was messy. It was ugly. It was the most terrifyingly competent thing Vrax had ever seen. He stood by the main viewport, watching the debris field of the Kyrax glitter in the starlight. Beside him, Thorn had removed his jacket and was rolling up his sleeves, revealing a jagged scar on his forearm. "It distresses you," Thorn said, watching Vrax. "Our ship, our methods." "It is chaotic," Vrax admitted, his mandibles twitching. "There is no harmony. How do you coordinate? How do you maintain focus without the meditative links?" "Focus isn't about silence," a human female said, stepping up to the console. Wore a grease-stained uniform and had a cybernetic eye that whirred softly. "It's about the mission. I'm Admiral Chen. Welcome to the *****. Sorry about the mess. We were busy rewriting the laws of thermodynamics." "Admiral," Vrax bowed, a gesture of respect he had never offered a lesser species. "Your gravity weapon, the anvil, it is technology beyond the High Synod. How did a species so young?" "We didn't discover it," Chen said, looking out at the stars. "We survived it." This was the beginning of the reveal, the peeling back of the layers of humanity that the Dominion had never bothered to look under. Vrax listened as Chen and Thorn spoke, not of golden ages and divine rights, but of disasters. They spoke of Earth, a world of storms and earthquakes and volcanoes. They spoke of a history of war, of almost wiping themselves out, of learning the hard way that the universe is indifferent to survival. "You look at the stars and see a garden to be tended," Thorn said, offering Vrax a cup of a steaming, bitter black liquid. "We look at the stars and see a jungle full of predators. You evolved in a paradise system, Vrax. Your predators were gone before you invented writing. We had to fight for every inch. We had to be paranoid. We had to be practical. When we met the Dominion, we didn't see gods. We saw a bureaucracy that had forgotten how to bleed." "And the fleets?" Vrax asked, gesturing to the viewport where more blocky human dreadnoughts were warping in, their ugly hulls bristling with the railguns that had shattered the Kyrax. "You hid them." "We didn't hide them," Chen corrected. "We just didn't parade them. We keep our stick hidden until the wolf is at the door. It's an old human proverb, speak softly and carry a big stick. You only heard the soft speaking. You never looked for the stick." The cultural contrast was stark. The Dominion was a culture of face, of appearance. To appear weak was to be weak. Humanity was a culture of results. They didn't care if they looked weak, as long as they could punch a hole through a moon when the time came. This psychological depth, this strategic humility, was alien to Vrax. It terrified him more than the weapons. A weapon can be countered. A philosophy that embraces being underestimated is a trap that never closes until it is too late. As the ***Hephaestus moved to intercept the second Kyrax wave, Vrax witnessed the human element in action. He saw the crew joking in the face of death. He saw a technician duct-taping a conduit that was vibrating loose. He saw the chaos of their bridge coalesce into a singular, razor-sharp intent the moment the combat klaxons sounded. "Target locked," a weapons officer announced. "Solution plotted. Firing main batteries." The ship shuddered. Vrax watched the screen. Another Kyrax hive ship, this one trying to flank the Dominion survivors, simply ceased to exist. The humans were dissecting the battlefield with the precision of a surgeon and the brutality of a butcher. "Why?" Vrax asked quietly, the question slipping out. "You could have let us fall." The Dominion treated. "You like servants. We were going to sacrifice you. Why save us?" Thorn turned to him. The look in his eyes was ancient, far older than his species' short lifespan should allow. "Because we know what comes after the Kyrax." The statement hung in the air, heavier than the gravity of the anvil. "Act 3, the narrative arc whispered in the structure of the moment. The unity and the larger twist. The battle for the core systems was brutal, but with the Terran coalition leading the charge, the outcome was never in doubt. The ugly ships of humanity formed an impenetrable wall of steel and physics around the delicate spires of the Dominion. They took the hits that would have shattered the crystalline hulls of the elves. They returned fire with a fury that broke the back of the Kyrax invasion. In the aftermath, the High Synod was reconvened, but the atmosphere had changed. The moss gardens were still there, the obsidian walls still drank the light, but the silence was different. It was the silence of humility. Vrax sat on his throne, but he felt small. Thorn stood in the center, flanked now by Admiral Chen and a cadre of human scientists. "The Kyrax are retreating," Vrax announced to the chamber. "The Dominion is safe. We owe a debt we cannot repay." "We don't want repayment," Thorn said. "We want an alliance, a real one, not masters and servants." "Equals because we need you." A murmur of confusion. The humans had just demonstrated military superiority that made the Dominion look like children. Why would they need the Ethelguard? "The Kyrax were running," Thorn said. The holographic display changed. It didn't show the galaxy anymore. It showed the intergalactic void, the deep dark. "We interrogated the captured Hive Queens. They weren't invading. They were fleeing." "Fleeing from what?" Kael'thas asked, his voice trembling. "We found a signal," Thorn said. Buried in the cosmic background radiation. It's not natural, it's artificial, and it's getting louder. We call it the Great Silence. The hologram zoomed in. A shadow was moving against the backdrop of distant galaxies. It wasn't a fleet, it was a negation of light. Stars were winking out one by one in a perfect, straight line. The Kyrax consume biomass, Chen explained, her voice clinical but tight. Whatever this is, it consumes laws of physics. It unravels reality. It is entropy weaponized. The Kyrax ran because they knew they couldn't fight it. They tried to take your territory to hide. We stopped the Kyrax, Thorne said, looking at every counselor in the eye. But we cannot stop this alone. We have the hammer, we have the stubbornness. We can break matter, but we don't understand the song. You do. Vrax realized then the true nature of the humans. They were not conquerors, they were builders. They had realized that their ugly physics and the Dominion's beautiful resonance were two halves of a whole. The humans provided the structure, the concrete, the steel. The Dominion provided the energy, the art, the soul. You need our aesthetics, Vrax asked, trying to comprehend. We need your science of harmony, Thorne corrected. We can build a wall, Vrax, but against that shadow, a wall isn't enough. We need a shield that sings. We need to combine our brute force with your elegance. We need to merge the anvil with the harp. The realization washed over the Synod. The humans had not just saved them, they had elevated them. The arrogance of the Dominion washed away, replaced by a terrifying purpose. They had underestimated the humans, yes. They had thought them simple, but in doing so, they had failed to see that simplicity is the foundation of complexity. The fleets are burning, Vrax whispered, the title of the history yet to be written forming in his mind. But not ours. And not yours. No, Thorne said, looking at the encroaching shadow of the Great Silence. But if we don't work together, the stars themselves will burn out. The camera of the mind pulled back, leaving the chamber, leaving the planet, rising above the fleet. The blocky gray ships of Earth moved into formation alongside the shimmering, crystalline spires of the Ethelgard. It was a strange, discordant image, metal and glass, brick and light, warrior and poet. It was ugly. It was beautiful. And for the first time in the history of the galaxy, the silence of the void did not feel empty. It felt like a breath being held before a scream of defiance. The humans had arrived. They had been underestimated. They had let the enemy burn. And now, facing the death of the universe, they turned to their former masters, offered a hand, and said the most human thing possible. We have a lot of work to do. Pass the wrench. The narrative did not end with a period, but with an ellipsis. The future was uncertain. The threat was existential, but the unity was forged in the fires of underestimation. The Ethelgard looked at the humans and finally saw them not as mud dwellers, but as the bed. Rock upon which the future would be built. The philosophical reflection settled in Vrax's mind as he watched the combined fleet maneuver. The universe was not a hierarchy of forms. It was a symbiotic organism. The strong needed the wise, and the wise needed the strong. The humans had taught them that survival is not about purity. It is about adaptability. It is about looking at the darkness, smiling a jagged, defiant smile, and lighting a match. Let them come, Vrax said, his voice joining the human comms channel. We are ready. The fleets turned toward the dark. The engines flared, blue ion and red fusion, mixing into a blinding purple light of unity. And somewhere in the dark, the silence paused. It had expected prey. It had found a predator. The story of the Dominion ended that day. The story of the Alliance began, and the first chapter was written in the burning wreckage of those who had dared to think humanity was weak.